Now, coming up, we'll be joined by Bartjan Wegter, the EU Counter-Terrorism Coordinator. The Dutch diplomat is at the forefront of Europe's fight against terrorism and is in the spotlight today, given yesterday marks 10 years since the deadly Brussels bombings that took the lives of 32 people. 16 who were on board a metro just a stone's throw from the Euronews studio here in the EU quarter, and 16 who were inside the Brussels airport departure area just checking in for their flights. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us here on Europe Today. So look, 10 years on now from those horrific Brussels attacks. For victims and their families watching this morning, what changes do you feel have been made here that makes Europe safer than it was back in 2016?
Well, first of all, like you say, today is really that we think about all the victims like we did yesterday. There were national commemorations in Belgium. Why? Because this affected so many people. I think we all know people in some way have been affected by these attacks that reverberated really throughout Europe. Now, what I'd say to victims today is that we're in a much better place. We haven't seen this type of large-scale concerted attacks in Europe for the last 10 years or so. And that's very much thanks to, I would say, in the first place, the activities of our law enforcement intelligence agencies throughout Europe.
So that's obviously very reassuring as well for our viewers who are tuning in this morning. So what are the chances of dying today in a terrorist attack in Europe?
Well, if you consider the number of attacks that we've seen a different kind of attacks. We've seen the more self-initiated attacks by lone actors, if you will. So IS, that was responsible for the terrorist attacks in Brussels 10 years ago, has really adjusted its strategies, which means that we've also had to adjust. So I would say that the chances are low, but what we see is that we're trying to grasp a new phenomenon, which is new, which is young people radicalizing very fast, radicalizing online, and that's something we have to grapple with today.
And as someone who covered those terrorist attacks, I remember back 10 years ago, there was no trust between member states. There was very bad coordination as well between authorities. Has that improved today? Very much so,
very much so. We've, in Europe, and I should say very much pushed also by the Belgians and the French, who of course were the first affected by these major terrorist attacks. Their services have very much put together, for instance, a task force together called Task Force Fraternité, to work together on these investigations, but also to push very much for efforts at European level, meaning that we've put in place interoperable databases. We've strengthened our borders. We exchange information much more fast at different levels, at national level, but also at European level. And mostly, what's very important is that at European level, was also beyond strengthening our borders, we've invested much more in relations and dialogues with third countries, because we know that the terrorist threat emanates also from beyond our borders very much.
And we're reporting, of course, on the 24th day of the ongoing war in Iran. We've seen that Europol has warned there could be immediate repercussions for us here in Europe, be that violent extremism or cyber attacks. What are you seeing?
Look, any situation of conflict and violence, instability in any region, always gives an opportunity to terrorists to assert themselves. And what we're seeing is, of course, that it creates a lot of narratives, a lot of propaganda online that, again, the young people that I mentioned before and many others will be affected by, can be influenced by. That being said, Iran has for a long time already been known as being what I would call a lethal spoiler, using terrorist tactics on our soil, instrumentalizing criminal networks to carry out attacks, to basically disrupt our society, to target dissidents, cyber attacks. We've seen a range of, let's say, instruments used by the Iranians. So it's been on our radar for a long time. Of course, in the current context, you could argue that that threat will only increase.
OK, Bartjan Wegter, thank you so much for coming to us here on Europe Today on Euronews.